Washington, D.C. This is across from the White House here.
From the White House. It's all within sight of these fires and what's happening. Our Kevin Corke is there on the scene, was just showing us that the historic St. John's Church, which has been there since 1816. Every president since James Madison has attended services and sat in the pews there at this church, often seeking comfort and guidance and wisdom in our country's worst moments. It's often where they gather on Inauguration Day before they're sworn in to be the new commander-in-chief. 200 years of history, and as Kevin showed us a short time ago, that church is on fire across from the White House. Secret Service is out in force, as are protesters, and you can see not just protesters, but rioters who are going the next step towards violence and destruction. Kevin Corke is standing by there as we are now 25 minutes here in the nation's capital from an 11 p.m. curfew. Kevin, you have been showing us and telling us about the Secret Service ramping up efforts there as we are now 25 minutes away. Any sense that this will clear up in 25 minutes or people will be persuaded to leave?
I don't know that they'll be persuaded to leave, but you're right. They are certainly ramping things up. If you can look very carefully just beyond the flames here as we bring you these pictures, you can see Secret Service, Park Police, and others. I imagine the National Guard is over there too. Yep. They're moving us all the way up now to H itself. Now, what does that mean? That means that what began as sort of a line of humanity over at Pennsylvania Avenue over the last couple of days moved the crowd out to, I'd say, the last third of Lafayette Park, again, just north of the White House. And now they are literally right up here to H Street. My imagination, or rather, I imagine that they're going to try to move us and the rest of the crowd off of H. I'm not sure in which direction, so we're ready, we're mobile. Unfortunately, at the moment, you see fire in front of me. As we go to the left, there's a fire inside the church office of St. John's Church, as you just mentioned, Shannon. A devastating and sad scene. It looked like what might have been the nursery is still ablaze, and smoke is now pouring out of the building. You can see some people still milling about. But unfortunately, I just don't know that there's any way we can get fire department personnel over here. To my right, as we swing back around, you can see there's a small structure. This used to basically be a restroom for folks here at the park. It's also on fire now. So this is, if you love this city, this is America's city. This is a devastating and sad day because the fires are just that. They don't represent the memory of a man who was brutally killed. The fires are just fires, and people are taking advantage of this circumstance. If I might tell you what I'm seeing here. There were peaceful protests earlier. People were really out here stating their piece, saying what they wanted to say about the killing of George Floyd. Tonight, it's a very different scene, Shannon.
People in the streets and with their signs, chanting and raising awareness.
I'm right behind you.
Okay, please move as you need to, Kevin.
Yeah, they're trying to clear for the fire department here,
like,
looks like. So we're going to back out. We're going to toss it back to you, Shannon, and we'll come back to you when we get a chance, okay?
Floyd's own brother issued a call for peace.
If I'm not over here messing up my community, then what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing. Because that's not going to bring my brother back at all. It may feel good for the moment, just like when you drink. But when it comes down, you're going to wonder what you did.
Antifa wants or cares about, and it's not what other radical elements want. They want war. They want to tear down what took us almost 250 years to build, literally and figuratively. The president tonight reaffirmed his duty to defend the Constitution.
My first and highest duty as president is to defend our great country and the American people. I swore an oath to uphold the laws of our nation, and that is exactly what I will do.
Now, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, whose nursing homes became COVID killing fields, said he's not going to seek and doesn't want the president's help.
I was shocked at the force they used to move the protesters, who could not have been more peaceful, calling out the American military for a photo opportunity. These are young people who still have idealism and want to make this nation better, and that's a good instinct, and it should be encouraged.
It should be encouraged. We've been showing footage all night of what they're doing throughout Manhattan. And by the way, some of what we saw is what I saw last night up close and personal in Washington, D.C. The protest wasn't very focused on the heinous injustice committed against George Floyd. Yeah, there were a few signs and there were a few George Floyd t-shirts worn, but there were no candlelight vigils, there was no singing and embracing. People were taking selfies in front of Secret Service agents whom they were mocking and swearing at, and in some cases, spitting at. I'm not sure what any of that accomplished. But the violent and vengeful elements were focused on creating chaos, terror, and fear across America. So don't you dare lie to the American people by saying that any of this had anything to do, in its violent core, with George Floyd. From what his family says, George was not that kind of person. He wouldn't do what these people are doing tonight. Peaceful protests are usually held, as I said to Hannity, during the day. After all, we know that because under the dark of night, under the cover of darkness, we can't see who's throwing what, who's starting what fires, like the one that I saw as we were leaving the scene at the historic St. John Church. Now, we walked to the car seeing these historic hotels, beautiful buildings, boarded up, graffiti everywhere. I felt like I was back in Iraq in 2006 in February, except I actually felt a lot safer on the streets of Baghdad than I did at times in D.C. last night. Now, the aim of these criminal enterprises, including Antifa, but not limited to Antifa, is to undermine confidence in our institutions of government at all levels, local, state, and federal. These wanton acts of violence are part of a coordinated effort to eventually overthrow the United States government. It's well funded and it's well organized on social media. No Twitter warnings, by the way, from Jack Dorsey, even though they seek nothing short of an overthrow of all that we love and believe in. An elimination of our Constitution, basically all of our rights, including the Second Amendment and much of the First. They don't care about George Floyd. They're using and abusing his memory to create more suffering and more chaos. It's like one giant video game to some of these folks. But their call to duty is one of annihilation of the country that we all love. Now, where did this all come from? I was thinking about this today and talking to friends and down the road and in D.C. Where did it come from? Why is there so much hate? The American people and law enforcement officers are overwhelmingly good people. It goes way beyond anger over the tragedies of Floyd and Trayvon Martin and Philando Castile. The genesis of this seething hatred began decades ago at our universities, and it spread like a contagion into all levels of learning. Radical professors attacking the ideals of Western civilization, and it's only gotten worse. Yesterday, check this out, one professor at the University of Alabama provided a tutorial on Twitter about how to pull down national monuments. And guess what? The tweet by Professor Sarah Parsack is still up on Twitter. And Jack Dorsey claims Trump's tweets are encouraging violence? This woman is a professor, and she's getting paid with the tax dollars that the University of Alabama gets. And by the way, universities are teeming with America-hating indoctrinators like her. And not only will she not get fired for that, she'll probably get an award at the next faculty meeting. The finest colleges in the nation are producing America-hating agents provocateur. Like this aggrieved Princeton and NYU law school grad, Collingford Mattis. He was allegedly behind the wheel of a tan minivan as his passenger, fellow attorney and Fordham Law School grad, Uraj Rahman, when she threw a Molotov cocktail into a police cruiser. Hateful, anti-American poison is also spewed in some of our churches as well. Who can forget Obama's pal, Reverend Jeremiah Wright's U.S. of KKK rant? But ultimately, this all comes from us, the people. How are we parenting our kids? Are we teaching them to love and respect everyone, no matter what race, no matter what ethnicity? Are fathers on the scene at all? Are we teaching our children to love or hate America? Are we teaching them basic right from wrong? Don't take anything that's not yours, even a penny. When we don't teach the light of God's love, we risk that our children and our country get sucked into the darkness eventually. And that's what you're seeing play out tonight. Now, I can't imagine that anyone with a brain or half of one would want to get mixed up with this crowd. Look at them. They're pretend privileged soldiers who would melt if forced to defend themselves. Ultimately, this is where strong leaders emerge to lead people away from the lawlessness, away from the darkness. Yet today, blue state mayors and governors have failed to act to contain the madness. Afraid to do so would be politically incorrect or somehow portray an alliance with President Trump. This is not about President Trump. This is about America, preserving her. And some media figures, by the way, have aided and abetted the chaos, portraying those driving the lawlessness as somehow justified in smashing, grabbing, pushing, beating, destroying, and yes, ultimately killing, they hope, the spirit of this country. They're portrayed like modern-day freedom riders, violating curfews and taunting National Guardsmen should be celebrated, apparently, in some media outlets. These news anchors, that's what you want to call them, they're taking sides with anarchists. That's how much they hate President Trump and ultimately the old normal, as they seek to replace it with, I don't know what, some type of new normal that's going to be great, peachy keen. They're willing to have the country burn out of their obsession with removing Trump from office. Well, that's not going to happen. Americans are loving people, but they've had enough. They've had enough of lockdowns, and now they've had enough of lootings. It's time to defend our founding principles: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We do this with respect for our fellow man, with our love of God, and our belief in the inherent goodness of mankind. And that's the angle.
This is Philadelphia earlier today. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this is Philadelphia in the movie trailer World War Z compared to earlier today. Look, the same, looks exactly the same.
Police used tear gas in Seattle as protests continue in cities across the U.S. Curfews are in effect around the country as protests over the death of George Floyd continue. The 46-year-old died after he was pinned to the ground by Minneapolis police. On Monday, President Trump threatened to deploy U.S. military if states don't quell unrest. Authorities in Seattle were seen firing tear gas at close range on a protest near Cal Anderson Park. Video via at Preston TV News.
U.S. Marshal shot in the head at a Las Vegas protest.
Hashtag breaking. Multiple law enforcement officials have been shot in Las Vegas. Reports of fallen officers. Metropolitan Police officer shot in the head.
Are you guys ready for this? The brick pellets are being dropped off for the rioters in Antifa by Acme Brick Company. Guess who owns Acme Brick Company? Berkshire Hathaway, and Bill Gates recently stepped down from the board. It's also owned by the Marmon Group in Chicago, who was founded by none other than J. Robert Pritzker and Berkshire Hathaway. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Are you guys ready for this?
This has been every major city in the country and building. Wolf, you got people.
All right, y'all,
on your
take a
screen.
look down.
What do you
Hold
want
on.
to talk about now?
This tear gas is now being fired. You can see what's going on. The police.
Smoke fills the air over the Washington, D.C. monument.